So welcome to the Node.js Next 10 meeting for October 13th, 2021. We will start off by taking a look at the agenda, which was on issue number 94. And let me open that up. Come on. Trying to open up the Google Doc. Okay, there we go. If people can add themselves to the agenda here, let me add that to the chat. That would be great. Okay, so before we get started, is there any announcements people would like to share? I guess the first thing I will share is that the PR that we generated from our discussion so far in terms of the technical priorities is open. And it's in the Node.js node issue 40235. I'll add that to the minutes here. And, you know, there's some discussion going on there. I think I've addressed most of the discussion so far. But, you know, I think it's moving along in terms of, you know, getting some collaborator discussion and hopefully getting that landed so that we can use that as sort of our top technical priorities to then sort of do a more deep dive into the like the specifics of what we might be doing on particular sections. So any other announcements that people want to share? Okay, well, let's go and look at the issues which were tagged for the agenda. So the first one is 39672, provide pre-built Node.js images or cache. So I think, Tierney, you'd been fairly active in that discussion. Is there an update that you have to share? If you're talking, you are on mute. Maybe we can loop back to that one. We might have lost Tierney for a second here. So I'm just going to go back to looking at the other ones. The next issues were some of the things we pulled out from the deep dives that we planned. The 89 is technical deep dive documentation. So looking at like how we might improve the documentation, because that was one of the technical priorities. The other one is a deep dive on maintaining, growing the level of contribution in the future. That one's not necessarily part of the technical priorities, I don't think, but it is something we've talked about as being important. So we want to do a deep dive on that as well. And then I guess the last issue on the agenda was the PR that I mentioned earlier in terms of the draft content, right? So actually it was the draft content. So this one I think we can close since the PR is open. So really, I guess it sounds like, you know, from the agenda, we're at the point where doing some deep dives makes sense. Now, I think we want a little bit of a bigger audience, not a bigger audience, but like a bigger group to get into the details of some of those. This is a new time, but we have had a challenge in finding a time that works for people every kind of couple of weeks. Oops, I should promote Tierney again. I think Beth had the suggestion that maybe we should try like another mini summit. So that makes sense to me in terms of like maybe picking one of our deep dive topics and then, you know, trying to do a mini summit on that to see what would make sense, see who's interested and so forth. Does that sound good to people, or what does everybody else think?
Yes, it's good to me.
Yep, good to me too.
So on that front, the question would be for our mini summit, you know, last time we did, let's see, let's take a look. I'm just going to look at the issue for the mini summit next 10. be closed. Mini summit. So we did a 10 to 2. I'm thinking in that we could do like deep dives into 2 sections. Does that make sense to people? You know, if we did 2 hours, I guess a little bit less, like maybe an hour and a half on a deep dive section.
Yeah, I think an hour and a half would be good. I mean, we definitely used the full amount of time on the other one.
Yep. So I'm thinking like, you know, an hour and a half on each would give us then a half an hour of sort of like breaks between things or that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Okay, so thinking that way, then the question would be like, what would we want to do as our 2 initial deep dives? We have 2 on the agenda here, which is like documentation and maintaining, growing the level of contribution. But we could pick any one of the like the technical priorities that we have in the other PR. And I'm just wondering if we want to try and pick a mix of things to, you know, I don't know, appeal to a broader audience or a broader group of people who would want to be involved. What would be for people here? What would be our very top priority things to do a deep dive on?
I'd say probably just continuing to go down that list that we built out for a while. Would be how I'd try to approach it.
Right, we have this list here. So we basically have the modern HTTP, suitable types for end users, documentation, WebAssembly, ESM, support for features from latest technical script, observability, permissions policy, security model, better multi-thread support, and single executable applications. I wonder if like, I don't know. I know, you know, Tierney, you've had thoughts on documentation. Do we think there's a group of people we could pull together on that front? Or I'm just thinking like, it would be nice to start with some ones that we think will get the most interest into.
In my experience, documentation, everyone's interested in, but nobody's interested in enough to work on.
Okay, right.
So I would, if you're looking for that, I'd probably not recommend documentation. I think documentation needs a lot of work. I don't think it's a particularly attractive one.
Yes, it's not our low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, I think I'm just going down this list. I think you'll get people who care and are motivated for observability, but it'll be slightly smaller. So it'll be like less people, but more involvement for that. And I can, yeah. And then, I mean, I care more about single executable applications, but I've seen pretty consistent +1s to that, but I'm not sure.
I think you know, I'm just listening to you and looking at the list too. I'm wondering if something like suitable types for end users and single executable applications, because those are ones where like single executable applications, I don't think they're being discussed. So things like observability, I think is really important, but we do have the diagnostics working group. So it may be something that, you know, we get together with that group and figure out, but like the single executable applications and the typing, I don't think we've got any sort of documented approach, you know, or like, I don't think I could point to anything in the project that kind of gives a, hey, here's the things we're working on and what we should be working on. So they might be two ones where we can go from 0 to something at least, right?
Yeah. That sounds
How
good.
does that sound for other people?
Yeah, I would agree with you on that part. Yeah.
Beth, does that sound good, or do you have other ones you think will be better to start with?
They make sense to me. I'm good.
Okay, so I'm just going to paste those two. If I can get back to where is And I think on the documentation front, I wonder, Tierney, like, is there something we should explore with the foundation?
I don't know. I mean, like, there's a lot of things that can be done. I don't know at the foundation. Like, I guess, what do you mean in the context of explore with the foundation?
It's kind of like, can they help? You know, like, would it make any sense for the foundation to say fund a technical writer to help improve the docs? Or
I mean, I would love that. I think I mean, having, you know, touched the docs here and there over time and having talked to people about them many times, I think it's less like, I think there's a step that needs to happen before a technical writer, which is like getting up some infrastructure isn't the right word, but like getting our tooling up to date on that as well, and kind of having it be a little bit more modern than it is. Like, we do have the most basic tooling we can kind of have for that, but there's definitely more that could be done. I think that might be a even precursor step, and that's my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but that's been what I've seen a need for.
would you
for
have
quite
any
a while.
explanation of, sorry, and any examples of like another project that does the docs really well?
I mean, yes, I think Electron does docs very well, and I've talked about this extensively in the past. I think Electron does docs very well. They wrote a custom docs parser that helps them do a lot of things, including generate types.
Right, so that could be related to the typing part too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I guess it's like, because, you know, my thought is, if there's something good out there, how can we borrow, reuse
Yep.
that?
Yeah.
And,
No, I
you know,
agree.
what would that take? It's in part takes like, you know, just exploring the different options. It either takes somebody who's interested and can push it forward, or, like I know there's been discussions in the past of like, you know, if it's technical writer side, like maybe that's something you need to actually get some support to do, right? From, say, the foundation or whatever.
I also don't think we have to explore those things independently necessarily, or like synchronously. We could explore them all at the same time. So, like, you know, talking to the foundation about that, because like I know at least the CNCF does that for Kubernetes, although they're in a physically different situation. But yeah.
Right. But I guess it's kind of like, if we thought that was useful and we could get consensus across the project, like, at least if we have an ask, like a specific ask, right? And then like, maybe it could be like, we're looking for sponsorship of this, or I don't know, we might, you know, be able to explore different ideas for how to make it happen if we had like a path forward. You know, I guess on the reusing, it comes down to like how much work it is versus how much disruption, right? And in terms of, you know, is there some, I guess incremental is good in some ways, except that takes somebody with a sustained commitment to keep it moving forward over time, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it I think part of that is like getting us to a good foundation. So like, you know, a technical writer could definitely help with like, you know, making sure every section has like a code example. Like, that's a good starting place. Like, that I kind of wish we were at. And then also documenting, like, you know, extending our documentation on like what should be included, like the meta documentation a bit of like, how do you do this well? That's another kind of step there that you can take, or another result or outcome that we can have from paying someone to do this, is like, here's how we could continue to make this better.
Right. Yeah, I think like because we often hear also too, like people are like, well, how do I contribute, right? Like if we can make it more concrete what we'd want to do, that might open up that as an option too.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah,
I was
and I
just
think-
exploring, like, we picked two for a mini summit, like maybe a mini summit on documentation at some point too, but I was just exploring if there was anything else, like other than trying to round up the interested people into a summit, that we could do in parallel with that. But because this is like a challenge faced by many projects, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Infrastructure wise, I guess is at this point it's very specific to each project, right? How they generate their documentation.
I generally, yes, there's been a lot of standardization on like DocuSource and stuff.
Right.
But even that, like Electron switched to DocuSource and is still doing their like, linting or parsing. So like generally, yes. And it's also really hard to get docs right. So wide spectrum of successes and failures.
Yeah.
There.
I'm just thinking, like, if it sounds like you need more than just like, hey, we're using this particular tool, right? You need a tool plus there's a bunch of JavaScript specific things that sort of follow on from that as well.
Yep.
I know you've mentioned what the Electron team does. Is it documented somewhere, that you've pointed stuff people to, or?
It's not well documented because they kind of built it and use it and know how it works, and
Right.
that's kind of it. Let's see, cpmb node docs. I think I have a repo that documented where I was exploring if it worked for Node.
Right.
The one challenge with it is basically needs it to be fundamentally rewritten for Node, which like a lot of it's transferable, but the problem is they expect only one export per module, which it turns out is a pretty important thing. But yeah, if you go to bnb/docs parser, oh wait, is it docs parser? Hold on, is it docs parser? I think it is. No, it's, wait, look, I'm trying to find. Yeah, no, bnb/node -docs -parser. I'll put a link in the chat. That is where I was exploring what's similar and how kind of workable it is for us. Their work to rewrite it, they're open to it. It's not a full rewrite. It just needs changes that are like, rehooking stuff up and adding stuff. And I'm interested in working on that, and I know there's another Microsoft employee who's also interested in working on that.
So what would it? I guess the one question I have is, like, I go to the API docs,
Mm-hmm.
and if the only thing we changed was the infrastructure, how would that be better? Is one thing to get a clear picture of.
Yeah, if you effectively for what I've seen, at least comparing the two, and like changing. Do you mean like starting to, like, theoretically, if docs parser worked for Node, what would that kind of,
yeah, like
magically
what's
look
the
like?
win
Yeah.
if we so here I'm just gonna like bring up this page, right? So
Mhm.
this is the current docs. You can click in, you can find things, and like personally, to me, it doesn't look terrible. So I'm just trying to like, have the discussion of like, what's the instant win if we switch the infrastructure, right?
So, I mean, technically the UI wouldn't change at all, right? Like it's effectively what their docs parser does is it's a linter. It's an extremely aggressive linter that enforces very strict rules on how you write your markdown in a way that is effectively technical. Like you were writing an API in Markdown, but in a very, very normal human writing way, like how humans would write documentation.
Right.
And the result of that for this page, say, is that you have a lot more consistent documentation throughout because of how structured it is. Everything is familiar and consistent, and there's not like, you can't really tell who wrote it. Like that's one thing that I noticed. Yeah, so like context isolation there is a good one to look at probably.
Okay.
Or
Sorry, I'm just
no, you're good. Yeah, development context isolation.
Right. Okay.
under
Good. There we go. Right.
Okay, this is a guide. Where is the API doc? Oh, click API at the top. Sorry. API
Okay.
docs. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So like all of this is it's more consistent in that the structure of how the documentation is written across every page is the same.
Right.
Which in my experience is the biggest problem with Node of everything is different and you don't really know what you're going to get on any method.
Right.
It just depends on who invested in it.
Right.
The other the other benefits of that are like they run this in basically they generate TypeScript definitions from this, and if those TypeScript definitions fail on a build, like on a PR, so if those
Yep.
are wrong, they automatically spit those out. That then tells them, okay, we need to update the docs for this. So you end up over time having better docs because it shifts where the priority of docs are up to the very front.
Right.
And so
yeah.
that ends up being a better experience in the long run.
So I mean, one of the things that like comes to mind is sort of like the code coverage. It's nice because it provides info that says, here's where, we're doing well, here's where we're not doing well. If there was an approach whereby we, it sounds like what you're saying is it's not so much like, I mean, it's not that we necessarily have to make this look massively different, but that it would enforce something which looks more consistent. So I'm wondering, like, could we basically turn it on one page at a time?
Yeah.
And therefore have that big long list of like, here's the pages that actually run and pass. Yeah. And here's the pages that don't. So anybody who wants to go and do some work on the docs, here's something that you can go and do, which is to make that page work under this additional set of linting and whatever.
Yep.
And that's a good concrete. It may take a long time, right? But like, it seems like, say in the code coverage, it is something that people pick up because it's very digestible, very understandable. Yep. And there's the tool telling you whether you got it right or not, right? So by the time you're ready to run the PR, most people can look at it and say, okay, well, yeah, the information still looks good, and the tool says it's good, so yeah, that can land.
Yeah.
So I guess it would be putting together that as like under that, docs theory, the other PR lands, we say docs is a priority, and that's like, what are we going to do specifically? This sounds like, a good pattern to take to say, okay, well, we want to crank up the tooling on the docs is one of the things that would help.
Yeah.
Versus just, bringing in somebody to edit them, because it's not just like an edit would be a one-time thing.
Yeah.
Versus the tooling is like, hey, it's a forever thing, and it helps us when we're writing new docs, which I think, definitely is the way to go.
Yeah. And I guess also in that vein, if that was something we wanted to ask the foundation for help for, there are definitely people in the ecosystem who would be very good at helping with that.
Right.
I like I don't know how to actually pronounce his full name, but like Worm, the person who maintains Titus, the person who maintains like Unified and stuff, which is presently I think what we rely on to some extent. I think he does contracting and stuff as well, and he's super lovely. So that's that's a potential avenue of kind of setting this up if that's something we want to do, and like really making this solid for us.
Right. Okay. So that it sounds like there's like, unless there's other ideas out there as to how we could make the docs better, this sounds like a decent proposal as like, in terms of we're kind of doing the deep dive on documentation, at least a little bit. Like, it kind of sounds like there could be a something that says like, here's the first thing we can improve in terms of our docs, right? It's the consistency, like listing out what is it that we're going to get if we do this.
Yeah.
And then saying, okay, this is like some key things that, would help the docs if we did them, blah, blah, blah. Then here's actually a tool that we're aware of, which will help us get there. And then, 3, we think we can do this incrementally. Here's what needs to be done to sort of get there. It sounds like, you have a few people interested in doing the tooling side of the work.
Yeah.
I think if we put together that sort of proposal, again, we'd want to, and with the, hey, we're going to do it page by page, there's always the risk you would do some work on the tool, and then when people see what the first page looks like,
yeah,
there's still discussion, disagreement, whatever. But at least by trying to lay it out beforehand, and maybe kick it off as a strategic initiative or whatever, but make sure people have ample time ahead of time to say makes sense, doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we really can do it incrementally, it seems like, once you get a couple in, then the momentum should be able to pick up.
Yep.
So I wonder, I guess the question is like, it sounds like actually on the documentation one, we could actually have we could have a fairly more in-depth discussion that you might be able to lead if people were interested in coming to it. But I'm not sure if we want to do that or just try and write it down and through GitHub and stuff, try and get people talking or thinking about it. Because unlike the other two, I think we've got some ideas already, right, that we could capture and socialize versus having a deep dive brainstorm to figure out where to start. I don't know, Tierney, if you think like we could write up, you could write up your proposal in a next 10 issue.
Yeah, I could do that.
And I guess it's with it sounds like you've got the offer to work on the Electron stuff if people are interested, right? So this is kind of the proposal to say, this is what we think is the next step we should take on the documentation. It provides these benefits. We're willing to do this part of the work if people agree this is useful and interesting.
I mean, I will also say, like, I don't want to overcommit for someone.
Sure.
They've expressed an interest. I don't know, how much of that they can actually commit to. So I definitely want to be upfront about that. And like, I'm happy to pair with them. And I'm happy to kind of do work on this. I don't think I can personally take on leading it. But yeah, I'm more than happy to document that kind of stuff and get a direction on that.
Yeah, it could be like, yeah, we think that doing this would make sense, and then if so, it's okay, this particular piece needs some work.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, can we actually make that work happen? Because it sounds like trying to find any other tool that would do something similar. Like I'm assuming there isn't any other one out there that we know of that would do the same job or a better job or anything like that.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then like, okay, if we can't do that piece, well, we won't progress, but like we wouldn't be able to do anything else likely either, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think just having this is what we think the tangible thing we should do and a plan. Whether we can get people to do it, commit to do it, whatever is sort of a separate thing. At least if for each of these areas we had this is what we think we should do and it adds this value for all the different ones. And since, we could start with that one, it maximizes our chance of actually getting them to happen.
Yeah.
But it's no guarantee, of course.
Yep.
Okay, so it sounds like on that one, like maybe if you can write that up and we could collaborate through GitHub a bit on that one. And I'll take the action to try and schedule a mini summit, see if we can get that kicked off to talk about the types and the single executable applications.
Cool.
Just on the documentation part, should we also include, let's say, a translation effort on, I don't know if Electron did that, but I know React and Vue and other community did translate the documentation in multiple languages with the help of, let's say, team across the world. Should we also take that into account?
I think that is in, by the way, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, cool. My GPU crashed, but I didn't unmute, or I didn't mute, so. Yeah, I think that's kind of already covered by the internationalization stuff. Like that can be relatively separate from this, I think. From at least from the parsing work. But I'm happy to see how we can explore that in it as well.
I guess the question there is like, do we think that's strategic? Like a strategic thing that will be important. I know there's the sort of the internationalized effort, but I don't know how much progress that's made.
Yeah, that's fair.
If we thought like, translating to a specific language was strategic, that's the kind of thing, again, I could see like,
yeah,
the foundation, I think, got translations of the certification courses right into, I think it was Chinese. And it's like, maybe that's something to discuss with, could they find a partner that would be interested in doing that?
Yeah.
But I think it would come down to us if we want to come up with, on that front, what are the key things we think that could do to improve the situation? And, in terms of the success of Node going forward, what are the key things that are really important, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I remember when I was working on the React one, the Chinese and Russian were really keen to work on that. Spanish and French also. I think those four were the most involved. We had the most people involved. But
what I don't know is how much. Sorry, go ahead.
Almost in the same way, I was thinking. No, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry, my question's a separate one.
No, I was about to change and to discuss about another point on documentation. So
okay,
if you want to finish on that, it will be better.
Yeah, like what I don't have enough expertise to know like how much not having other translations is holding us back. Like, is it that it's a nice to have that there's other, there's translations, or is it we're losing 25% of usage because the translations aren't there?
Yeah.
I have a very specific, context, so it doesn't affect me. So I don't really have any info that helps me understand that side of things. And I don't know if anybody has more of that kind of data or context or.
Yeah, I'm French, so I know a lot of people which try to work with English documentation, and with, let's say, time, they are able to do it. But I'm pretty sure that if they had some French documentation, they would prefer that. But it's mostly maybe not for younger or new people coming in the field. But I remember when I was in China, a lot of people, even if they were able to speak English, it wasn't really, yeah, they really prefer to have in their own language, at least in China.
Yeah.
How about in terms of other languages out there? Do we know, like, you know, the Pythons, the Rubies, the Javas? What kind of translations are available in those cases?
They're pretty good about that. I mean, Java, I think, is much more enterprisey, so they invest a lot more into that. Like they have a lot more direct corporate donors. Python, I think, has also started doing a better job. Although I'm not sure. Let's see. Yeah, English. They have Spanish, French, Japanese, Korean, Brazilian, Portuguese, simplified Chinese, and traditional Chinese. Yeah, so they're all doing better than us.
Right. Okay.
I mean, not everything's perfect, but like it's better.
Yeah. So that, I mean, that's one data point, right? Like if other languages have found that it's important. So where'd you get the list? Okay, I see. There's the Python, right? So there are.
Yeah.
You can just drop down and say there's French. Yeah. Chinese. So they have a list of, yeah, English, Spanish, French, Japanese, Korean, Brazilian, simplified Chinese, and traditional Chinese. What about Java docs or Ruby documentation? Okay, I'm just looking to see. Okay, here's V3. Let's see what kind of documentation there's there.
Yeah, for Ruby, you have French, German, Bulgarian, Spanish, and Polish.
Okay, interesting. And then I wonder about Java. Sorry, I'm
It's
just
taking
looking.
forever to load. Very on brand for Java.
I got the help
Uh,
center up. So this looks like generated documentation almost, but I don't see.
Yeah, I don't find a way to change to other language.
Yeah, I don't see language. I mean, I'm also not really finding like API docs. Like it's
Here, I'm going to share this in terms of the, well, actually here I can, since I am sharing, I think that's what I found, but I'm not seeing anywhere in terms of languages.
there must be some kind of translation. Like there's no way that Oracle hasn't invested in that at all. It also might be doing language detection on your browser and not giving you an option. I would not put that past them.
Back in
Although I guess
2012, there was somebody saying there wasn't any. Like you know, I don't know what other people's experience is, but like I worked with a company in Montreal for a while. So French was the language they would speak in the office. But the technical documentation that was used was still all English.
Yeah.
So I'm, that's where I'm not 100%. Okay.
There is a large body of like work of people doing research on this stuff, and I'm sure we could find that and pick that up. Yeah, there's a lot of prior art here that I'm sure we can kind of lean on.
that just seems like one of the other things that maybe is important for us to figure out, right?
Yeah.
One, there's like some concrete ideas of how we make the documentation better, so we can work on that. The other part would be like, and I think it's a good point from John, is like, are the translations something which is, you know, holding us back as well?
I think another thing is looking at where we're getting downloads. That's generally a pretty good map for us of usage. And it can also tell us, you know, get us out of a bit out of survivorship bias where we're not getting downloads.
Right.
Like the JavaScript community in like South America is amazing. It's largely either Spanish or one of the variations of Portuguese. You know, they are amazing JavaScript engineers. And if we're not seeing like a ton of downloads from there or a ton of traffic to that site, which I don't know if we have analytics still, that's the, you know, that could be an indicator. I mean, another thing is, you know, there are open source analytics things. I know people have issues with Google Analytics, which is fine, but somehow putting that on the doc site and getting information that way to help know, you know, browser languages that are available and getting a list that way could be an approach.
It also seems like this should be a common open source question. So maybe going to the Linux Foundation and asking some questions might help there too.
Yep.
With proposal or with benefits. So I'm just sorry, I'm just taking notes from the previous stuff. Benefits, approach, next steps. Discussed. So I'm just saying Python/Ruby do have a number of maybe. Sorry, I was just typing that in. I should probably put that back into the minutes here. So I'm just taking a few notes. So yeah, I think that's probably a good question for us to figure out, like as a project. Forget whether we can, you know, the resources or whatever, but like, do we think it's a key important thing to have the different language translations or not, right?
Yeah.
And
I mean,
you know,
I think it probably is, yeah.
right, but it would be good to have as a, like, what do we base that on?
Yeah, mostly on the React team, what the call was really to just allow multiple teams from different countries to do their own translation. So it didn't really require work except the tooling one time. And after that, you can just deploy a French documentation or English or in whatever country you want. So it was really split between multiple teams and multiple countries without too much action after that from the core team of React.
Right. Yeah, I know, understood. Like there's the enabling it, and then there's separately the like
after that,
making sure it happens, right? Because like if it's something we think that like is be key to success, then we should probably do more than just enable, right? Or I mean, as another data point, I don't know, Tierney, do you know, since you know a bit about the Electron one, do they have translations?
They have crowd-in. I think that their crowd-in stuff was one of the things that we kind of based our crowd-in stuff on.
I guess has that resulted in good translations if I go to the
my
Electron
understanding is
doc?
yes.
So
But it's worth noting that this doc site is like we're currently working on completely revamping it. This is like the revamped version. I don't know how the there you go. Well,
that's just
even
I don't know. I
English
think
one
that was
doesn't
just
work.
a bad link or something. That's
Yeah.
not so I'm just looking at
Yeah. And this has all been done through crowd-in.
right. So yeah, I think the discussion to have is like, how key is this for the project? Because right now we're not. I know the website team has some thoughts or discussion on it, but I don't think it's like actively moving forward so that I could say like next year we'll have something, right?
Yeah.
In terms of translating our API docs, at least.
Yeah.
So I think from this group, it's like, in my perspective, at least is, can we figure out based on data, something that says, oh, this is critical or not, to sort of raise the focus on it if it is something that we believe is critical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna go back to see what languages, what kind of translation languages stuff are within some of the Red Hat stuff to understand that side of things too. Okay, so I think that's kind of like if Tierney, if you can open the issue in terms of the proposal for like the sort of structure, and then we should probably open another issue, which is like, determining how critical translations would be to future success. Which I can open. We can maybe get some discussion there, and maybe I think asking like the foundation for their experience and stuff, and just having that in the end, even if we end up just documented with, well, we thought about it, but we can't really justify more focus, or yes, we can, like even just having gone through that would make sense on that front for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that's probably a decent discussion on that front, and I don't think we have time to kind of we only got 5 minutes. We don't have time to get into the next one. So we have a couple of things to plan. We'll try and plan a mini summit to dive into these two categories that priorities that I've highlighted, and through GitHub we can work a little bit on the documentation side of things.
Yeah.
Makes sense?
Yep.
Makes sense. Yep.
Okay. Great. Well, thanks for everybody who attended and anybody who's been watching on the live stream, and we will see you in GitHub and next time. Thanks. Bye.
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 Oh, and there was somebody, sorry, Mohammed, didn't promote you, but